Buongiorno wine lovers. Welcome to Wine by the Class, where we journey through the diverse and captivating world of regional Italian wines. Italy boasts a rich tapestry of terroirs, grape varietals, and winemaking traditions, from the rolling hills of Tuscany to the sun-drenched vineyards of Sicily. Join me as we uncork the stories behind these exceptional wines, exploring their unique characteristics, food pairings, and the passionate people who craft them. Prepare your palate for an unforgettable experience as we delve into the heart of Italian wine country, one region at a time. Our wine expert, Anthony Verdoni, will guide us. He is a passionate and knowledgeable Italian wine expert with over 50 years of experience, the author of several books, and a deep appreciation for Italy's rich history and diverse wines. Please join me in welcoming Anthony, who will be our guide on this vinous adventure.
Okay, buongiorno. We're going to be doing a series of Italian wine classes, and today they'll just be a general introduction, so that's probably a good time for me to introduce myself. My name is Anthony Verdoni, and I have been in the wine business since 1971. Before that, I taught Latin and Greek at St. Peter's College in Jersey City, where I was eventually called the wine professor. Not that I'm a professor of wines, but I was a professor of Latin and Greek, which seems like an odd situation. But when you study Latin and Greek and no one wants to study it anymore, you have to figure out another way to make money. So I went into the wine business. I've specialized in Italian wines since around 1980. I've seen a lot of changes, and I've seen a thirst on the part of American consumers to find out more about Italian wines. So I've put together a study of about 25 classes or so that deal with Italian wines. And today I would like to start by talking about Italy a little bit, give you some statistics, and then get into the four types of wine, the four most important types of wine. Let me put it that way, because now wine is used in seltzers, it's used in so many things. But the basic four types of wine, if you just remember the word fast, are fortified, aromatized, sparkling, and table. And we're going to deal primarily today with fortified, aromatized, and sparkling, because the rest of our classes are really going to deal with table wines. That's really the impetus of the course. But at any rate, let me tell you something about Italy, all right? You know it's a peninsula and there are two big islands. It looks like Italy is kicking Sicily, trying to kick it past Sardinia. And Italy has 20 regions. The regions are comparable to our states. Okay, so there's 20 regions. It's basically about the size of California, but it has a larger population in California and some really great and important cities and beautiful countryside areas where wine is produced. In addition to the 20 regions, there are 107 provinces, which are similar to our counties. Okay, and there are, I counted these up myself, 1,904 communes or municipalities. And in many of these municipalities, there are wineries. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Italy drinks more wine than we do, but I have to tell you that wine consumption in general throughout the entire world is going down, with the exception of a few countries. But the United States is about the same for the last 20 years, about 2.68 gallons of wine a year. And most of the wine comes from California. California is responsible for over 80% of the wines produced in the United States. Just a great area for producing wine. Okay, the Italians drink about 11 gallons per person. When I started in the wine business, they were drinking 29 gallons per person. Now it's down to 11. We've stayed consistently around 2.5 gallons per person. Italy produces 7.4 billion bottles of wine a year. And that varies because Mother Nature has something to say about it. Sometimes the weather is not good. We are definitely seeing climate change, and things are growing better in certain areas and not as well in other areas. So a lot of the traditional stuff has sort of disappeared or waned at least. The United States produces 3.5 billion bottles of wine a year. So we're a large producer, and we drink a lot of wine. We export a lot of wine. And Italy, Spain, and France are the three largest producers of wine. Okay? United States is fourth. And the fifth just depends on Mother Nature. Right now, Chile is number 5. But it could be Argentina. For a while, it was China. But Chinese production has dropped off by about 33% in the past couple of years. So China is still there, but really more as a devotee largely of the expensive French wines, expensive California wines, but they buy some Italian wines as well. Okay, so that's more or less how Italy does it. In Italy, the Ministry of Agriculture controls the production of wine, and the Ministry of Finance determines the prices and the taxes and all of the other aspects. So it's a joint venture between those two ministries and other ministries as well, but those are the two primary ones. We used to have in the United States a Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and we called it the BATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, all right? They pulled firearms out of it and set up a separate agency for firearms. So what we have today is the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, which is also called the TTB. And they are the ones that really control the wine business. If you have a label that you want to get approved for a wine, you send it to the TTB. Containers of wine that come into the United States are basically controlled by the TTB. They keep track of everything. Okay? So that's a little background on Italian wines and some of the statistics. I thought it might be fun to get into some of the fortified wines. I think this is pretty interesting. I don't know if you find this interesting. I find these things interesting. I'm still learning, by the way, after 50 some odd years. But at any rate, this is O.P.C. Marsala. And the first thing that strikes me is it says imported. And it's an interesting, I think that this is pretty interesting. This is from Marsala, which is the name of a town in Sicily, on the western coast of Sicily. And I was trying to think, well, what Italian word, Marsala, what is that about? It's an Arabic word, the Marsh el Allah, the port or the swamp of God. That's the name of the town. An Arabic word. There's big Arab influence in Sicily, as there is Spanish influence and Italian influence, French, Norman influence as well. It's a fascinating island, important island. So the wine has to come from the Marsala zone, and that's regulated by the Ministry of Agriculture. There's a specific zone. Okay, and why does this say imported? Because the O.P.C. family is an Italian-American family, also has a Marsala from California, because the United States is not a member of the common market. It's not a part of the European community. So they can call wines champagne or call them Marsala. Italians cannot call their sparkling wine champagne. Champagne throughout Europe has to come from the Champagne region of France. Okay, so Marsala has to come from the area in Sicily delegated to be Marsala. And there are a lot of categories of Marsala. And I don't know if you're interested that much in the categories, but I will mention them. And again, you should try to drink a Marsala. Have a glass of Marsala. No one does. All right? Why? Because they cook with Marsala. We all cook with Marsala. It has wonderful flavor. So if you taste it, it's going to taste wonderful. It's also used in various cocktails and things, but the primary use of it is to cook. For veal scallopini alla Marsala, or chicken Marsala, or for the sweet dessert zabaglione. Zabaglione is a confection that comes from Piemonte in northwestern Italy, separate region, completely separate kind of a culture, but they love the flavor of Marsala and egg yolks and put the concoction together. In fact, they used to make Marsala in Piedmont, but then the Sicilians came in and said, how can you make Marsala in Piedmont? Marsala is a town in Sicily, so all Marsala must come from Sicily. Okay, there are certain approved grape varieties. This is a Marsala Fine. This is the basic Marsala. Okay, but Marsala Fine is one of about 4 or 5 different categories of Marsala. So Marsala, it's a fortified wine. And I wrote a book with some colleagues many years ago. We described fortified wines as wines that are enriched with brandy or some other spirit. So you have a regular wine, and then you add a certain amount of brandy to it, or a neutral grain spirit, some sort of alcohol, distilled alcohol, and it becomes fortified. It becomes stronger, which you can figure out from the root, forte, strong, you know. They are usually between 16 to 20% alcohol and are used as appetizer or dessert wines. And the famous ones are sherry from Spain and Porto from Portugal. Those are the famous ones. And there's an interesting story because if you look at the history of fortified wines, they developed in England. The British loved fortified wines. They loved a glass of sherry. In fact, sherry is an English distortion of Jerez. Jerez, Jerez, which is the town where sherry comes from, one of the towns where sherry comes from. And so a war was going on back in the 1800s. Italy was looking to become an independent country to free itself from Spain and Austria and the papal domination. The English had a hard time getting ports and sherries because there was hostility in those countries as well. And they started to bring Marsala into England, and then Garibaldi invaded Sicily, and the Spanish were going to fight against them because the Spanish were controlling that part of Italy. They were controlling Sicily. So the British sent a fleet down to make sure that nothing got out of hand and that the purchases of Marsala were smooth. And many British firms established themselves in Sicily to produce and to ship back to England Marsala. That was the primary market. The Italians and Sicilians always made table wines, but these fortified wines, this was an explosion in business for them. And if you look at some of the names of the early producers, okay, you have names like John Woodhouse, who was the first one to market Marsala in England in 1773. And then there's Ingham and Whitaker. You know, these are British names, and many of them settled in Sicily and established companies there, largely to ship Marsala. Okay? So the Italian wine laws that started to regulate Marsala came in around 1969. This was a big year. And 1969, they did away with a lot of Marsala concoctions. You used to be able to buy Marsala with egg yolks in it. Okay? And I remember all the women used to give the egg Marsala con uovo, to the thin girls, the skinny girls, to bolster them up. Okay? There was also Marsala with coffee, Marsala with almonds, spices. All of these were eliminated, and we wound up with just a certain category of Marsalas. And I'll mention some of those to you now. There's Marsala Fine, which has to be 17% alcohol. It can be called oro, which means gold, or amber. And this is the basic Marsala. This is what everybody cooks with, okay? Most of the production of Marsala is in this area. Then there's Marsala Rubino Fine. And except for being in Sicily, I never saw a bottle of this in the rest of the world. It's a red Marsala. It tastes very much like a red port, but it has that volcanic kind of taste that you get from Marsala. Okay, but I haven't seen the Rubino Fine outside of Italy, outside of Sicily. Then there's Marsala Superiore. Now we're starting to get into some better Marsalas. These are increased in alcohol and in style and in size. And some of them are called SOM, Superior Old Marsala. There's one called GD, Garibaldi Dolce, Sweet Garibaldi. This Garibaldi was the, I call him an Italian, but he was born in Nice. I don't know if you know that. He was born in Nice because the Kingdom of Savoy controlled part of Italy, the part up by Piedmont, and also part of what's now France. And that's where that Garibaldi was born, in Nice, France. But at any rate, they have a Marsala named in his honor, London Particular, LP, because of the popularity in London, and Vecchio, just old. So this is a distinctive kind of Marsala, Superiore, more alcohol, more size, more finesse than the regular. Okay, and then there's Marsala Vergine, which is very fine. And that's very much like a cocktail sherry. And again, difficult to find. The big name in this is Di Bartoli. Marco Di Bartoli, who was an old friend of mine. We got in trouble together. I may explain that in a future class. But at any rate, Marco's company, he's passed away now. He used to make about 24,000 bottles of wine, all very fine. Okay, all Marsala Vergine. Okay, no addition of brandy, no addition of cooked must, no addition of anything, just pure Marsala. A great cocktail to have. Okay, altogether there are about 18 million bottles of Marsala produced. So this is very small in comparison to sherry and port, especially to sherry. Okay, so that's a little something on Marsala. What about the storage of Marsala? We're going to talk about storage of wines. Marsala, once you open it, it's pretty high in alcohol. It's going to hold up for a while. I'd recommend buying a smaller bottle if you're going to use it for cooking, especially because you don't use the whole bottle. You only use a little bit of it. If you have a large bottle and you don't use it a lot, it is going to start to oxidize a bit, lose some of its power and finesse. And it's always good to store it in a cool place. For example, a refrigerator would be fine. Okay, and it should hold up for a period of time, at least for a couple of weeks or even more. Okay, so that's basically what I was going to say about Marsala. And if you have any questions, you can just let us know. I'll be happy to try to answer them or make up some answers, whatever it takes. Research some answers probably for you. Okay? There are other kinds of fortified wines in Italy. The most popular one is called Vinsanto. Vinsanto means holy wine. We're not really going to go in detail. Maybe when we do Tuscany, we'll go into it because that's the area where a lot of good Vinsanto comes from. We may talk about that. It means holy wine, and it's made from specially dried grapes, and that's how it becomes fortified, from specially dried grapes. Okay? And there's a story about how Vinsanto got its name. Supposedly there was a church conference in Italy, and there was a prelate from the island of Santos. And when he tasted the Vinsanto, he said, "This wine tastes like the wine of Santos." The Italians thought he said, "This tastes like holy wine, Vinsanto." And supposedly that's how Vinsanto got its name. You don't have to believe that. If you don't believe that, you're not going to get excommunicated. There's another fortified wine from the island of Pantelleria, which is it's part of Sicily, but it's between Sicily and Africa, Tunisia. And it's closer to Tunisia than it is to Africa. Okay, but it's very Italian. A lot of the boats that people leaving Africa trying to get into Europe, they wind up in the island of Pantelleria or Lampedusa. Lampedusa is a small island. It's one of the only areas in Italy where no wine is produced. Okay, Pantelleria is the farthest south where wine is produced. Okay, not far from Tunisia. And they have a wine called Moscato di Pantelleria. This is also made with dried grapes. That process of drying the grapes is called the passito process. We'll speak about that later on. But these are the fortified wines of Italy. And remember, just added brandy or something like that to increase the alcohol, stabilize the wine, and produce a nectar that is capable of being enjoyed for a long period of time. Okay? I'd like to speak about the A in fast, fortified, now A, aromatized. And I have to show you this wine. I picked Martini and Rossi because I'm friends with Cesare Martini, lives in New Jersey. He's one of the members of the Martini family. It's a real family. Rossi was a real family. These were family-owned businesses in the beginning. They became global, multinational. And the aromatized wines, the center for them in Italy is Torino or Turin. Okay, and you probably know that there are wines like Noilly Prat from France, others as well. So these aromatized vermouths are from both Italy and France, and they can be manufactured anywhere. In fact, Martini has a facility in Argentina. The Argentines drink a lot of sweet vermouth. That's their drink of hospitality. They're big wine drinkers, you know about that. With their steaks, they have, wonderful red wines, largely Malbecs. But they also have a penchant for entertaining and having a cocktail, a greeting wine of sweet vermouth. Okay, but the area around Torino, and you get into France a little bit, as well. This is really the center for the vermouth trade. I mean, stock vermouth was made in Trieste, so it doesn't have to be made in this area. In fact, probably the most famous vermouth is made in a little town called Chambéry. Chambéry is in France, and they are known for sweet, dry, and what's called Bianco Blanc in French. There's one company, Dolin, D-O-L-I-N. You can find them in the United States. They make very, very fine vermouth. Okay, so why is this that you have these two countries, this one little area that touch each other? Well, it's part of the Kingdom of Savoy, and the leaders of Savoy became the first kings of Italy. And what they did was they established a referendum, and the people who lived in Western Savoy decided to be French, so they became part of France. The rest of the Savoiardi, the rest of the Savoy people, became Italian, largely in the area of Piedmont. So at any rate, that's aromatized. And aromatized wines, I think, are really interesting. They're very often called aperitif wines because they open the palate. They make your mouth water. They make you want to eat something. Okay, we use them primarily in cocktails, largely to make the martini. Martini is made with spirits and with the addition of a small amount of vermouth. And what is in vermouth, in addition to a little bit of brandy or spirits to raise the alcohol? There are congeners. There are different herbs, botanicals, roots, barks, seeds, flowers, herbs, and spices. And I will tell you that in addition to trying a glass of vermouth, which no one really tries, right? They just mix it in cocktails. But try vermouth. It's delicious. Try all different kinds of vermouths, okay? You can not only drink it, but you can marinate things in it, or you can cook with it. You can use it as a substitute for white wine. You can cook with dry vermouth instead of cooking with white wine, especially with seafood, because it has all these layers of flavor, which a regular wine will not have, okay? But vermouth has it, so it becomes very attractive. Every now and then you might hear the term Italian vermouth. Generally, Italian vermouth is a substitute for sweet vermouth, although Italy makes a sweet and a dry, okay? If you hear French vermouth, that is synonymous with dry vermouth, although the French make sweet and dry, and the Italians also make Bianco. They make a rosé. Rosé is fairly new. It hasn't really caught on, but it's really delicious, worth trying. And there's even an amber vermouth. Okay, so there are a lot of wines for you to try. I call these combo wines, both fortified and aromatized wines, because they're combinations of wine and spirits, or in the case of the appetizer wines, the aromatized wines, also different spices and herbs, etc. So aromatized wines are pretty attractive. And storage-wise, these are not that high in alcohol, 15%, 16%, and they could start to oxidize. So I would recommend buy a small bottle, put it in cocktails. If it starts to turn a little bit of a color, maybe you can cook with it. One of my friends who's a chef actually ages ginger in vermouth, keeps the ginger fresh. I don't know the science of that. I'm not a cook. Don't listen to me if I tell you something about cuisine, because I'm not an expert. There are also other aromatized wines in Italy, and there are aromatized types of wine in the world. For example, Lillet, Dubonnet. These are aromatized wines, aperitif wines, and well worth your investigation. And the center, again, is Torino. In fact, there's a wonderful triangle of Geneva, Switzerland, to Torino, to Lyon. In that area, vermouth is extremely important. And there are wonderful places to dine at in each of those three towns, Geneva, Torino, and Lyon in France. When did vermouth start? First of all, the word vermouth, vermouth in German, means wormwood. And originally vermouth was aged in wormwood casks. Now, wormwood is one of the ingredients that's used in some vermouth. These are secret formulas. Each vermouth company has its own formulas for making vermouth. You know, they don't follow a specific rule. They try to be distinctive. And Carpano, as far as I know, was the first to produce vermouth in 1786. But I have to tell you, you go back to the ancient Greeks, Hippocrates recommended wine with different herbs and botanicals in the wines as cures for diseases. So Hippocrates, the father of medicine, was very much involved in making vermouth-type products. Infusing herbs in wine is something that is extremely old, but it became a science really in the late 1700s, 1800s, and it's still around today. Not a whole lot is really sold because we use it primarily in cocktails, but it deserves a better fate than that. You know, I think you'll enjoy discovering, you know, the wonders of aromatized wines. Okay, the S in fast. We had fortified, aromatized. Now we have an S for sparkling. Okay? Now, this is difficult to understand. Sparkling wines are wines that have bubbles in them. Okay? We should talk about how those bubbles get in there, but it's important for you to know that there's a whole category of sparkling wines. Italy is a leader in sparkling wines. We'll speak about that in a second. But I thought it might be interesting for me to open a sparkling wine, show you how to do it. And first of all, there's a lot of pressure on the sparkling wines to keep those bubbles in there. Okay? So whenever you're opening a sparkling wine, keep your thumb on the top of it and take off the covering, which is usually some sort of tin foil or something like that. And I'm always careful with these. I've been in restaurants, keep the finger on it. I've been in restaurants where guys opened the wines carelessly and the cork went up and knocked ceiling tiles out, you know? So you don't want that to happen. And then there's a cap on the wine, which is attached to wire. So you have to take the wire out. And I don't take the wire off. Some people take it off. I don't like to do that. I find it's a little easier if you leave the wire on to remove the cork. Hold it at an angle and take the cork out. You can feel it coming out. Once it come out, see, hey, it's trying to get out. Okay? And they say if you do it right, the wine coming out is like a kiss. I don't know if that's true. The cork coming out is like a kiss. Sometimes it's more like an explosion. If you find the wine is starting to bubble out, hold it on an angle and it'll stop. Don't ask me why. I'm not a physicist, but that's what you do. Okay? So maybe you can give me the wine glass. I have the sparkling wine. That's the one there. Yeah. This is my favorite shape of a wine glass. Okay, it's put out by the Berlucchi people who make a great Italian sparkling wine called Franciacorta, which is made just like the French sparkling wines. Okay, not a lot of it produced, nothing like the production of champagne or Prosecco. What I opened here, by the way, is a pink Prosecco. I like pink better than Prosecco Rosé, but I'm not in charge. It's called Prosecco Rosé. It's regulated by the Italian government, by the Ministry of Agriculture. Okay? And regular Prosecco is made from, they used to call it the Prosecco grape. Prosecco is the name of a town. It's not far from Trieste. Okay? As Prosecco became a little more popular, it's only become popular lately. We used to try to sell Prosecco. It was crazy. We couldn't give it away. We would give away peach nectar. We'd give away lots of things trying to get people to buy Prosecco. All of a sudden, I think my personal feeling is that the women discovered it. It's a great luncheon wine. It's low in alcohol. It's not as serious as French champagne. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion of business of Prosecco. Okay? So they went to the old Roman name for what they call the Prosecco grape, which is the Glera, Glera. Glera only grows in this area, northeastern Italy, where Prosecco comes from. It comes from either the Veneto area or the area of Friuli, Venezia Giulia. Okay? There's a series of towns where a little better Prosecco comes than from the rest of it, but we'll talk about how much Prosecco is produced and where it comes from. Prosecco Rosé is made with a regular Prosecco, and they add a red grape variety, usually Pinot Noir. And it's usually, it can be a brut, can be an extra dry. This particular one is extra dry, which is less dry than a brut. Okay? Brut is the driest of it. And it also says Millesimato 2023. Millesimato means vintage. So this particular Prosecco Rosé is a vintage product. Very often, the Proseccos that you get, they're really all vintage products, but they're not marked vintage. Champagne can be aged at the wineries in Champagne for years. The same with the Franciacorta that I mentioned. But Prosecco can be released as early as 30 or 60 days from when it's crushed, when it's produced. Okay, it undergoes a short fermentation, usually in stainless steel tanks, and then it's bottled and shipped. Okay, so it's very easy to produce. Well, easier than champagne, let me put it that way. And you can see, again, from pouring it, it has almost like a salmon color to it. It's not really a bright fruity color. It's more of a serious salmon color. And I guess I'm going to tell you now how to taste the wine. I wasn't planning on it, but I guess I should, right? Because we're going to taste the wine. Okay, so the bubbles, good perlage. We say good bubbles. The language of wine, by the way, is French. We use a lot of French terms. Even though we love Italian wines, we fight with the French all the time. We use a lot of French terms. Okay, so this sparkling wine, okay, this Prosecco, salmon in color. You look at the color first. You have to think of the letter S when you're tasting a wine. Okay, you think of seeing the wine, and then you swirl it. You probably saw me swirl it. And if you're nervous about swirling a wine, I've spilled a lot of wine swirling it, go against a flat surface and swirl it on the flat surface on tabletop. And you won't spill anything. You'll be safe. The women will love you. They won't hate you. All right. After you do that, after you swirl it, now you've released a lot of the flavor, a lot of the aromas, the bouquet. And I have some good equipment that I was given by being Italian with my nose. Stick your nose in there and smell it. So you see it, you swirl it, you smell it. You pick up a lot of bright strawberry flavors. There's so much to this. It's very, very pleasant. And it's low in alcohol. A regular champagne could be 12.5%, 13% alcohol. This alcohol, first of all, they say, look at the label. You really have to look at the back label. That's where it has all the information. And this will tell you, it tells you it's fruity, elegant, chic, enjoy it, cool. That's propaganda. But it also tells you where it's made, and it tells you alcohol 11% by volume. And some Proseccos are 10.5%, even less than 11%. Okay, so now we've seen it. We've swirled it. We've sniffed it. All right, now we're going to sip and savor it. And when you do this, you chew on it, and you'll see where it's going to hit you in the mouth. You try to get a total experience. Really wonderful. It's very, very, you have to take my word for it unless you want to try it yourself, and you should. It's made my mouth water. This is a great first wine to have, good greeting wine. Okay, now after you do that, you swallow it, which I've already done. See it? All right? Swirl it. Sip and savor it. I left something out. See it? Swirl it. Sniff it. All right? Sip, savor it, and swallow it. Or, one day I was with Mr. Hubert Opici. We were looking to buy a Chianti Classico. We went to the tremendous wine fair in Italy called Vin Italy. And it's in Verona every year in the spring. And we tasted 56 Chianti Classicos to try to pick one to bring back to America. So what do? You can't swallow 56 wines. Even if you take a half ounce of each, you're drinking a bottle of wine. So you have the option of spitting into a bucket or into a glass. So that's another S. So if you think of the letter S and then you put everything together, your brain is able to tell you from this combination of things that you've done, the quality of the wine. And this is not only very good quality, but it's also what it's supposed to be. This is what a Prosecco Rosé is supposed to taste like. Okay? And very good. I think it's generally a little drier than a regular Prosecco. Now, you can also get Proseccos that are of a higher level. The top level is called Cartese, and it's usually $35, $40 a bottle, and it's very rare. It's extremely well made, pretty much the same way that regular Prosecco is made, but it's from better vineyard areas in a very delimited small zone. Okay? So that's something that you have to consider. What are the two most important things when you're picking a wine? We pick wines by varietal. Okay, we say, I like Cabernet. Well, you can have a Cabernet for $10. You can have a fine French Napa Valley Cabernet for $1,000 a bottle. So why is one 10 and another one 1,000? Because it depends on where exactly it's from and who made it. Those are the two things you have to determine. Where exactly is that wine from and who made the wine? And that's why you need a good partner, a good wine shop to go to, someone to ask questions and help you develop your knowledge of wine. Okay, this is pretty good. I'm going to have a little more. Okay, let me say a few things about sparkling wines. You might remember Dom Perignon, the monk, said, I am drinking stars. So that's what champagne is. That's what sparkling wines are. They're regular wines with stars in them. They're really wonderful. And the French have a champagne method, which we won't talk about now, but it's all based upon individually aging wines in bottles and then riddling, moving all the bottles around, putting them in the cellar. It takes years and years to produce this fine wine. Well, it wound up there was an Italian guy named Federico Martinotti, and he developed a tank fermentation system, which was later perfected by Eugene Charmat. So this Charmat Martinotti method ages sparkling wines in large stainless steel tanks. Okay, that's how Prosecco is made. And that's why it's ready to drink in only a month or two after fermentation takes place. Okay, it's always offered young. Low alcohol, usually 10.5. 8% approximately of the Prosecco produced is now rosé. The rest of it is regular Prosecco. Prosecco, a village not far from Trieste, northeastern Italy. Grape varieties, Glera, can have other grape varieties in it. There are other permissible grape varieties, but it's mostly or entirely Glera. And then the pink rosé Prosecco has the addition of red grape varieties, 10-15% of Pinot Noir. You know, Pinot Noir is not a luscious colored wine, okay? And that's why this has a salmon hue to it. Okay, let me tell you something about Prosecco. 660 million bottles a year are sold. 660 million. Okay, what about champagne? True French champagne, 300 million. But they make more money on the champagne than on the Prosecco because champagne's more expensive. The method of producing it is expensive. The image of it is extremely high and sells throughout the entire world. There's a sparkling wine made in the champagne method from Spain called Cava, and they produce and sell about 250 million bottles a year. And what we don't know too much about is Sekt, S-E-K-T. It's produced in Germany. And Germans love sparkling wines, by the way. They love all wines, as a matter of fact. But at any rate, they produce about 375 million bottles, or they sell about 375 million bottles a year of Sekt. But again, hard to find in a store. You can find Cava. Cava is usually very reasonable, very undervalued. It's wonderful. All right. And Prosecco is just all over the place now. Okay. But remember, Italy also produces Franciacorta, which is made very much like French champagne. And there's also a zone around Lake Garda that is famous for sparkling wines. The most famous of the sparkling wines around Lake Garda, around the town of Trento, is Ferrari. Okay? It's not related to the race car Ferrari, but the owner had the same name, Enzo Ferrari and Giulio Ferrari. Okay? And Enzo Ferrari said he liked to drink Ferrari sparkling wines. And they don't call them champagne, they just call them Ferrari sparkling wines. I always get a phone call or a comment from somebody, I have a bottle of Dom Perignon from the year I was married, and I've been keeping it in the drawer for 50 years. Well, I'm sorry, but that's a big mistake. Usually at the end of 50 years, the wine will have completely lost its effervescence and be dark in color. I've tasted some old champagnes, some as old as 1921, which was a great vintage, and they have a lot to offer. But it's not going to be that bright, fresh taste that you get from champagne. Champagne is like milk. When it appears in your store, it's ready to drink. Prosecco is the same way. There's no need to try to age it, okay? But I won't stop you from doing that if that's what you want to do, all right? In addition to making sparkling wines, the Italians make wine that's called frizzante. They're sparkling, but not quite as effervescent as Prosecco or as French champagne. Okay, these frizzante wines, most famous of them is Lambrusco, which has what the French call a perlage, like it'll have a nice head to it, lots of bubbles, and it's a very, very good wine. As a matter of fact, it's made in certain areas around the town of Bologna and in Emilia-Romagna, so Lambrusco from a wild grape. We'll speak about that when we get to Emilia-Romagna. Who knows when, but we'll speak about it. There's also Moscato d'Asti. Asti spumante is fully sparkling. Italian word for sparkling is spumante. Moscato d'Asti is more of a fizzy wine, low in alcohol, with a slight effervescence. And there are many other examples of frizzante wines. Okay, so that's sparkling. And we can remove these. I should show you this too. What do you do with this? Now it's open. I had a glass and that's going to be it. You're going to let all those bubbles come out. So they have these devices. This is really not an expensive device. Some of them are really expensive and really good. So you want to force this in. Okay. And once you get it in, need someone stronger than me. It's in pretty solid now. See, that will keep the bubbles from dissipating. Okay, so this is, I think, a basic kind of equipment that you want to buy. You want to buy something to keep the sparkling wine sparkling. Okay? All right, and as I said, if you have any questions, be happy to try to make up answers. I just want to point out also that the champagne cork, the Prosecco cork, is usually 3 levels of cork forced into the bottle under pressure. And when you take the bottle out, it comes out, looks a little bit like a mushroom, right? So that's just a little factor about that. And it stays on pretty well. This is all processed cork, Prosecco. I mean, it's an inexpensive wine, so they're not going to use expensive cork. It's like sawdust. And where does cork come from? The cork oak. There are some cork oak trees in Sardinia, but most of the cork in the wine business comes from Portugal. There's some in Sardinia, but Portugal, especially around the Douro area, even farther south, there's a lot of cork oak trees, and that's where they get the cork from. Take the bark off, and then they take the cork out of the bark. Okay? All right, we're down the home stretch here, and I do want to go over this label with you, but this is a table wine. Okay, and there's a lot of literature on this wine. First of all, the brand is Tinazzi. Tinazzi is the producer. Okay, and the wine is called Feudo Croce Imperio, LXXIV. You know your Roman numerals? That's 74. And that's their trademark for this wine. The type of wine is Primitivo di Manduria. And we're going to go over table wines in each of the classes from here on in. So we'll go over this in more detail. Primitivo is a grape variety. Okay, and Manduria is the area where it's from. And that's a little zone in Puglia, the heel of the boot. And you get a lot of information on the back label, which I won't go over. But at any rate, this is a pretty formidable wine. It's 14.5% alcohol. Tells you it's 100% Primitivo. It's aged in oak 6 to 8 months. And it pairs well with roast meats and grilled meats. It's a big, rich wine. And I actually had a little bit of this last night. I usually have a third of a bottle or a quarter of a bottle each night for 4 nights. And to keep the wine fresh, I use a Vacuvin. Okay? This is a Vacuvin, and this is the stopper of the Vacuvin. And you're probably going to hear this now. You hear a little fizz, and I'll show you why later on. But at any rate, that's going to keep the wine fresh. When you put the stopper in, and you pump it, and keep pumping until you hear a click. Come on, clicker. Hear it? That has taken all the air out and all the oxygen out. So now the wine will stay fresh for a while. For a while. A day, couple of days. You know, not indefinitely or anything like that. Okay? So this is a wonderful wine, Primitivo di Manduria. It's a good one. Primitivo is the same grape as the Zinfandel. Okay? It's related to the Zinfandel. They do DNA tests now. There was a professor from University of California, Davis, was in Puglia, and he saw these vines, and he asked what they were, and he said, it's Primitivo. He said, they look just like Zinfandel. So they did a series of studies, and they found out that it was related to the Zinfandel, and also in Croatia, they have a grape Plavi Malak, which is, again, related to the Zinfandel. Okay, so if you like Zinfandel, go to Italy, you can try Primitivo di Manduria, or any Primitivo. Most of it comes from Puglia. That's the indigenous grape variety of that area, one of the indigenous grape varieties. Okay? So that's all I was really going to say about Italian wines today. I hope I didn't go too long. I think next time we'll speak about Piedmont. We'll take that as our first region, speak more in general terms, and then introduce you to 4 wines from Piedmont. Piedmont's so important, we'll probably do 2 sessions. So we'll have 2 sessions on Piedmont, a total of 8 wines. And you'll see that it's really necessary because there's so many outstanding wines from that area. Okay, so thank you for your attention. Good drinking. Have wine with your meals. And buon appetito. And enjoy wine. That's what we're here for, to make you enjoy wine. If you have any questions, let us know. Thank you.